You are listening to Ace Comicals. I'm Greg, and today I'm joined by my co-host Rahul. Let's go! Hey guys, and welcome to episode number 75 of Ace Comicals. We didn't do a Halloween episode this year, but here at Ace Comicals, it's kind of always Halloween. Isn't that right, Ray?
It's always Halloween when you're around, Greg. And you're always around, Greg.
Yeah, so I guess you could say this is our belated Halloween episode, Samhain-cast, or Hallows transmission, whatever you want to call it. But I don't think... Yeah, I'm sad that I didn't get to do a Halloween episode, but at the same time, things happen.
And we're constantly talking about horror comics anyway.
Exactly. So, at the same time, it's always Halloween on Ace Comicals. So, how have you been, Ray?
I've been good. I'm riding... what's the opposite of riding high? I'm riding low off of a DIY failure today, so...
Oh, man.
Yeah, I was trying to put up a curtain pole, and it all went wrong. The curtain pole's too big for the wall. Which isn't entirely my fault. I made it to order, and it seems like they've delivered the wrong bits or something. I'm sure it's fine. I just need to take a break from it, and instead I sat down and read a comic for today. So it'll be fine. It'll be fine. It's just I've got this like spectre of a curtain pole just hanging in the corner, just mocking me.
I'm just imagining you sitting there, like, just kind of a little bit deflated with this wonky curtain pole that doesn't quite fit, kind of like half hanging off the wall.
Yeah, this is my Halloween horror story
with your comic.
Covered in like plasterboard dust. That's not too far off from the truth, Greg.
Yep. Oh well, let's see what's
going on.
Other than that,
I'm great. How are you?
Yeah. I'm good. I've been on holiday and came back in between episodes. I had like a little short break. I went to Budapest and got my Godzilla tattoo on the back of my leg finished. And we just kind of hung out, didn't really do like a lot of touristy stuff because I've been to the city before, so we've seen a lot of it. So it was like a kind of a hangout thing where we were just sort of like hanging out and catching up with Sophie's friends. And it was good. It was good fun. It was a nice break. And then I came back, and then I've been back to work, and in between that, I've just been at home chilling, reading comics, doing my usual Greg stuff. We did Halloween. We decorated the house. I made pumpkins and all that stuff, but it's kind of a quiet one this year. Went out on Friday evening because they were doing this this Halloween party at a bar in Leicester called Ton, and it was like it was Harry Potter themed, but it was just a general Halloween party. And I went as a Death Eater, which...
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so I had like a big black robe and a mask and a wand. And Sophie went as Sabrina the Teenage Witch.
I saw the photos. You guys it was really on point. It's a really good costume.
Yeah, and the best thing about... The thing about that Sabrina costume is it didn't... I mean, mine, I had to pay money for some of the stuff, but that didn't cost her a penny because she had all that stuff in her wardrobe already.
Yes, that's fair. It's like a headband, a black dress.
Yeah. This is Netflix Sabrina I'm talking, by the way. So she went as Netflix Sabrina. And it was a fun night. And I was a little bit hungover yesterday, Saturday. But yeah, that's it. That's how my Halloween week went. It was a quiet one, and I read a lot of horror comics and stuff in between. And then I've got a few things that I've picked out here to talk about today. So, Ray, do you want to kick us off with something, or shall I kick us off?
I can kick us off. I'll go first because So this is a book that I just read today. In fact, I wanted to read something relatively light. And you know me, I always want to read something cute, so I picked up this relatively short book called Anya's Ghost by Vera Broskal. This is published by First Second Publishing, I think they're the same publishing studio. Well, I think they are the same publishing studio who published American Born Chinese, which we talked about in episode 71. That's a book by Jean Yang. And they also published Demon by Jason Shiga, which I talked about in episode 15, way back in episode 15. So this book, the plot of this book is relatively simple. We follow this young girl, Anya, a young, angsty Russian teenager who is somewhat lazy, obsessed with her weight, obsessed with not appearing too Russian, obsessed with boys, and seems determined to hate everyone for no good reason, including herself. And so while she's angrily pining over a crush, she accidentally falls down a well and meets the ghost of a young girl who died 90 years prior, around the time of World War One. And like, Anya seems to be determined to be hostile to everyone in her life, up to and including this sweet, polite, and like heartbreakingly lonely ghost of this girl called Emily, who's been stuck in this well since her death, since she can't move far from her, her decrepit bones. And upon Anya's eventual rescue from the well by two horny teenage boys who only rescue her because she sounds hot, and this is a running theme in this book, in that most teenage boys are horny, self-serving, and all-round terrible, which sounds about right, really. And she finds that she's accidentally scooped up the haunted fingerbone of Emily, and along with it, she's brought along Emily's ghost. So while Anya initially, and to me, like kind of inexplicably, finds Emily a chore and wants to get rid of her, which is wild to me, because like if you could have this amazing new experience and like make friends with this friendly ghost, why would you hate it? But anyway, she eventually warms to her and they become friends. And Anya allows Emily to experience the world that she's missed out on, and Emily helps Anya like cheat at tests and win the attention of this boy that she likes, and all these other fun little things. So what this allows is some really tender moments between a girl and her new best like spectral friend, and an exploration of the things that they enable in each other, which, be they good and bad, and the ways in which this new relationship emboldens some of the worst parts of Anya and her behavior to her friends and her family and her peers, etc. And then it ultimately also finds itself in a surprisingly scary and like heartbreaking place, and plays with some really fun ghostly mechanisms, which I think wouldn't feel out of place in something like a Ghostbusters comic, for example. Yeah, it's really. I think you'd like where it goes, and I don't want to spoil anything. I think you should read it. But so the artwork, it's all done in this wonderful white, grey, and deep blue palette, with these really thick black lines, chunky bold lettering, and like clean contrast, particularly between like the humans' barely painted blue faces and the ghost like spectral stark white visage. We never really see things directly from Anya's point of view. Instead, we get a lot of time looking directly at Anya's face as she's processing these events that are happening around her. And like these moments of thought are given really nice dedicated space, multiple panels reflecting like the flurry of emotions in a few brief moments. The character designs are clean but very expressive. Vera does really great work with body language in this book, I think, throughout the entire thing. There are some moments close to the end where a character's sudden shift in posture signals how they're feeling, and like just the general closed-offness that, of an awkward teenage girl is expressed during a party. And I think that kind of stuff comes off the page really well. I want to point out some really cool moments. So I'm trying to pay more attention in these comics to things that can really only work in this medium. So my comic moments for this book that I picked out are, one, the moment where she falls down the well. So she's distracted by all these thoughts of like her slightly nagging mum and her slightly nagging best friend, and like having just seen the boy she has a crush on kissing this girl that she has no reason to hate, but hates anyway purely because she's that guy's girlfriend. So the cacophony of Anya's thoughts lead to her falling down this inexplicably like deep open hole in the middle of the woods. But it's really interesting because her thoughts clutter the frame and like compress around her and become really claustrophobic, and then all of a sudden they're left at the surface at the top of the page as she falls down the hole. I thought that was a really effective moment, and like immediately after we get this slow awakening in the dark after having been knocked out from the fall, and like this slowly building light from like dark to brightness as she discovers where she's at. And then later on, right at the other end of the book, there's a moment where she goes to the library to try and find some articles on microfilm, and she has this big discovery at the end of the book where the background is suddenly filled with the words and margins and like this viewpoint of the newspaper articles in the background, where the story that she's discovering is told in silent vignettes scattered around the page on top of it. I thought that was really, really great. And yeah, there's moments like this scattered throughout the book. There's some really effective moments of just these things that could only be done in comics. So ultimately, I picked up the book expecting a short, cute, mildly Halloween-related story because it's about a girl and her ghost buddy. And instead what I got was, much like American-Born Chinese, it's actually a look into the immigrant experience, this unexplored self-hatred that comes with it, because Anya is a Russian girl, and her mother brought her from Russia to America when she was very young. And it's also an exploration of like the relative experiences of other foreigners, be they other Russians like Anya's school friend or her mother who were less naturalized to America, or the spirit of this ghost whose last experience of the world was 90 years ago. So Emily's ghost affords a really interesting foreigner's viewpoint. So like much like an immigrant who is, quotes, fresh off the boat, which is something Anya is very quick to accuse others of, her being, being able to pass as a quote-unquote normal American teenage girl. Emily, the ghost Emily, she marvels at not only the modern day, which, she didn't get to see progress, like having been trapped in that well for 90 years, but modern day America specifically. She falls into the ideas of love and attraction promised by these teenage magazines that Anya gives her. She attempts to live vicariously through Anya, not only to resolve these unfulfilled and unlived moments from her, upsettingly short life, but also to meet the expectations of a modern culture-obsessed teenager. I don't think it's a spoiler to say that this is basically a recipe for disaster, and that's where the book goes. The book does remind me of American-Born Chinese, but it isn't quite as focused on the traumas, pitfalls, and unfortunate self-loathing of otherness, of being othered. It still goes to those places, but it kind of glances off them occasionally within the framework of how difficult adolescence is in general, I think. It's more a part of the tapestry of Anya's overall self-discovery of like being a teenage girl, while not really being a core theme of the piece. But overall, I'd recommend it as a really fun, light read with some of these nuanced looks into what it means to be somewhat of an outsider, and to have this kind of shitty view of people who are essentially in the same position as you, but a few years behind. Like one of her school friends, who is also Russian, is constantly trying to make friends with her, and is one of the most wonderful kids in this entire book. But she constantly brushes him off because she doesn't want to be seen, with another fob, another fresh off the boat. And I think it's a really good mixing of all these different things, and the place that Emily's ghost story goes to is also really interesting and has a nice twist and everything. So yeah, super recommend it. That is Anya's Ghost, and it's by Vera Broskal. I think that was published back in 2011. Yeah,
that sounds pretty cool, actually. I want to check that out. I mean, I like the idea of that well moment, that the page there that you described, because I can imagine like the thought process there is like all she's thinking about at that point is, oh hell, I'm falling. And everything else just gets left behind because that's all secondary to the fact that she's falling down the well. And I like how that might play out.
Yeah, this is what I mean. Like, it's definitely a comic book only sort of moment. I mean, I like to think that it's something that could be expressed in film or whatever, but it's one of those things that I thought, wow, that's only really given the space to breathe on the page in a comic that way, because you get to see her thoughts be left behind as she drops to the bottom of this like really deep well. It's a really interesting moment, and there's loads of that in this book. I think
I need to check it out purely for that. If not anything, if not the rest of it, because it does sound brilliant.
Also, some really funky ghost moments towards the end, which I think you'd really like.
So I mean that sounds great. I mean, I'm gonna just dive in and just mention a couple of things that I've been reading recently, because I just wanted to say, and I wanted to say it out loud on this podcast, that Hickman has fixed X-Men. He's fixed it.
Well, okay, so elaborate on that, please, because I haven't read any of the new Powers of X or what are the books.
I've been really enjoying House of X and Powers of X, and I've been really enjoying the fruits of House of X and Powers of X so far. These new series that have come spinning out of it, that kind of explore and explain Krakoa further and everything else, and sort of explain the different groups at work on Krakoa. And we've got like Marauders, which was great fun. Kitty Pryde might not be a mutant. We don't know. She can't use the gates, which is why she has to sail on a boat to get to Krakoa. She has to steal a boat. And then, it's just fun. It's just a fun comic. X-Men #1 was really awesome. And it feels so good to actually be able to enjoy and follow X-Men continuity again. Like, Hickman has cleaned it up and organised it without sweeping everything under the carpet, which I love. And it's fun, it's compelling, and it's a breath of fresh air.
It sounds like between Grand Design and this, it's a really good place to jump in.
Yeah, this is like that is exactly what it was designed as. It's designed as a jumping on point for people to enjoy X-Men, and fans new and old can get on this train and still have a great experience, because you don't have to know everything about X-Men history in order to enjoy it, because it does. I mean, we talk about this a lot on this, where we get new #1s that acknowledge the past, but also, usher in a new era and do it in a really, really balanced and good way. Well, I think this is like the this hits the golden ratio. So, and
if you don't have the history, if you don't know it all, then you can always refer to Grand Designs, which is a really good cliff notes to getting up to speed with the history of X-Men.
Yeah, definitely.
So what was the state of X-Men before the Hickman run? Because you were saying that Hickman's really cleaned it up.
Well, there was an awful lot going on. I think they'd attempted to restart X-Men a couple of years ago. You had like X-Men Blue, X-Men Gold, like the different... Yeah, and
okay.
I just didn't get on with it. They weren't good comics. Just wasn't enjoyable. There was basically there's just so much there, and so much had happened in X-Men history that it got to a point where you couldn't really, I don't know, I just didn't gel with it.
Too many moving parts. Or
too many moving parts.
Too many masters.
That's a good way to put it. Too many moving parts. But he's streamlined it a bit. And he's kind of consolidated those moving parts into... I mean, there's still a lot of moving parts, but they're bigger and chunkier. Like, it's easier to see what fits where. Rather than it being a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle, it's a 6-piece jigsaw puzzle, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of there's parts still, there's many parts, but those parts are consolidated into larger parts, so it's easier to deal with. And it kind of makes more sense. Everything makes sense. It's, it's good that way. And you mentioned Grand Design. Well, we have Fantastic Four Grand Design now by Tom Scioli, and my copy...
there's something about that which doesn't appeal to me as much. I mean, I guess because I grew up at least watching the X-Men cartoons. I never really read the comics that much, but I have no affection or affinity for Fantastic Four. So in some way, ways, it's great.
It's a sad place to be, Ray.
But not having grown up with the classics is my usual.
Yeah, but it's not.
And last time you said that's why you appreciate having me on. So my point of view on the Fantastic Four stuff is, I think. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I don't think it's not about not growing up with the classics. I don't think it's about that with this. I think I feel like this is just something cool to read, and obviously you will learn about the Fantastic Four. It's the Fantastic Four.
Let me make my point, because I was going to say I'm in two minds about this, because one, I don't have any affinity for the Fantastic Four to want to learn their history or have it refreshed. Like, it wouldn't be refreshed; it would be for the first time. It wouldn't be a refresher. However, because I have very little knowledge of the Fantastic Four except for the movies that had the ones from the 2000s with Captain America in them. I think it would be a good place for me to jump in and actually get caught up. So, like, it would be nice to see how with X-Men Grand Designs, I got a great refresher, and it filled in all the cracks of my knowledge, because I knew a lot about X-Men, but I didn't know all the comic book history of X-Men. Whereas this would be like, I want to see how different it is from literally, the ground up. Knowledge filling. So I think I'll check it out. But like with everything, I'll check it out when the whole book is finished.
The whole is available. Yeah. See, I feel like those movies may have only done harm to your perception of the Fantastic Four.
Oh, I have no doubt about that. Yeah.
and that may be the reason you feel no affection or affinity, because you only know those films.
Yeah, quite possibly.
But yeah, so I mean, it's there sitting on my to-read stack on my coffee table, ready for me to dive into it. I've just been flicking through it, actually, and it carries the same energy as Pisca's work. It's dense, it's a huge undertaking, and it's gorgeous to look at. And Scioli's work is awesome anyway. He's got like this retro, old-school cartoon work that is to absolutely die for.
Yeah, I haven't seen how the artwork is for Fantastic Four Grand Designs, because I really loved... who was the artist for the X-Men run?
Ed Piskor.
It was Ed Piskor. Yeah, I really, really liked that, the artwork in that, and how it harkened back to like the golden age of comics. Is this one different, or does it like lean to the same thing?
It's leaning in towards the same thing. Tom Scioli's got a similar style where he kind of leans heavily into what I will call retro comic art. So we're talking about like if you imagine some of the Jack Kirby stuff and things like that, he kind of leans heavily into that era, if you will, and he excels at making things look like you've bought them off the shelf and they are old, kind of thing. So yeah, he's that's his thing. Like he has this like retro cartoon style, that is carries a reverence for everything that came before him, and is kind of a nod to all of that.
What kind of decade do you think that is? Is it going for like the 60s, 70s era, or is it more 80s, 90s?
I think it's going for the 60s, 70s.
Because, I mean, the reason I asked that is because...
Maybe even the 40s and 50s.
Right, okay. So yeah, that was going to be my point, because as a quick aside, like, I feel like movies and games are... Like, for a while, movies have been appealing to the 80s, stuff like Stranger Things and, all these 80s aesthetic pieces that we're getting. And I think video games have been doing pixel art for a long time, appealing to the 8-bit, 16-bit eras. And we're slowly getting into the 90s. I think in TV as well, we're slowly getting more towards the 90s as well. Like that kind of... Yeah. What's the word? Like that kind of...
It's that 30-year rule.
It is the 30-year rule. That's what I was going to get at, the 30-year rule. And it's interesting that comic books aren't quite doing the same thing, because I don't really see many contemporary comics that are looking backwards to the 80s and 90s. I think they are still looking back to, 40s to the 60s era. I just think that's interesting. I don't have deep thoughts on it. It's just...
I think this
or is that not true?
Well, no, I mean, it happens, but like you say... Probably, I mean, I've read, I don't know, it's like a mixed bag in my experience. There's like a bit of everything, but I think people with comics, is people look back on the products of the 90s and the late 80s with less fondness than they do with because you get all this stuff about the dark age of comics and everything else, because everyone's talking about everyone, I mean, like huge muscles, millions of pouches, grimdark storylines, all that stuff. Like late 80s, early 90s comics and whatever. That a lot of people, they look back on it and they think, okay, yeah, this isn't great.
Yeah, because I mean, I'm definitely no comic historian, so correct me if I'm wrong, but like there was a comics like burst bubble around that era, whereas I think there was a technological boom in movies and games around the 80s and 90s. So I guess bubble...
Yeah, because 90s. I'm not I'm not a comics historian either, Ray. But I think that towards the back end of the 90s is when the bubble burst. Because you had like all these, like, they were bringing out all these comics in the 90s, and they were like, oh, here's this collector's edition, and these action figures that came out in the 90s that they promised to be, they had the promise of being a collector's item on the box, and it'd be sold in a comic book store, and you'd buy it and you'd sit on it, and then like it's worth like shrapnel now, kind of thing. So because they're mass produced. But yeah, I mean, it's just that was the bubble in the 90s when they were selling an awful lot of comics, but I don't know, it was just, it's a weird time.
Interesting to see where that goes, and if we'll ever get to that aesthetic again.
Yeah. I don't think we will. It's like I'd like to think we wouldn't. It's like with games, I'd like to think we wouldn't go back to the PS1 days.
It's happening though. We do get some. We're starting to get some stuff on like Steam at least, where it's harkening back to that fuzzy edge, like really badly aliased polygonal style.
But it's ugly as hell.
It is ugly as hell, but I think it comes with a bit of like charm.
Yeah, but I mean, at least you can make like sprites. I've always been a champion of the 16-bit era, 32-bit sprites and stuff, because you can make them look pretty. I
do agree. I agree with you. It's hard to go back and play PlayStation 1 games, for me personally, at least. Like, same. I know some people are okay with that, but because it's the advent of 3D, and it's just a hard thing to reconcile sometimes.
Going back and playing Sega Saturn games and PS1 games, and it's the same with reading 90s comics. I think a lot of comics in the 90s. There are a lot of really good comics from the 90s, but there's a lot of really ugly stuff as well.
It's also similarly with the technological viewpoint. I think it was the advent of digital art, and that came with a lot of like ugly shininess, which people have now perfected with the tech that we have today. With digital painting and whatnot. I think we've talked about this on a previous cast, but that's probably a factor.
It is, but yeah, I mean, Fantastic Four Grand Design, go out and buy it.
Yes, sir.
Anyways, so I'm going to move on to like the first thing that I wanted to talk about, which was this Death of Superman book. So we've got Tales from the Dark Multiverse, the Death of Superman. So I mean, like last episode, we had Marv on and we talked about the Nightfall book. So this is like the second in the Tales from the Dark Multiverse, and it's the same kind of thing. It's a kind of look into an alternate reality, an Elseworlds tale, if you will, to use the DC vernacular. It's really cool. So Tales from the Dark Multiverse, the Death of Superman. This is written by Jeff Loveness, pencils by Brad Walker, inks by Drew Hennessy and Norm Rapmond, and this is on pages 22 to 24, page 34, and page 42 and 43. And John Callis is on colours, Clayton Cowles letters this thing. So, the first thing about this is it took me back to my childhood bedroom. Listening to Superman's song by the Crash Test Dummies as a maudlin teenager. Now I just do it as a maudlin adult. But it's this slow acoustic ballad that is like a eulogy for Superman if Superman died. And the song itself came out in 1991. Superman didn't actually die until 1992. So kind of predates it a little bit. But it's the perfect eulogy for Supes. And it's weird because by the time I found this Superman book, it had all come and gone. The Supes had died and come back. But like when I originally found this as a teen, but it still hits me. Like, as much as my edgelord self would shit on Superman in conversation back then, like, I would say things like he was boring or he's too powerful. But as you get older, you get wiser and you start to see it from the other angle. And the other angle is that he has all this power. He has all this, he could be a god if he wanted to. He doesn't have to abide by our laws or live within our boundaries, but he chooses to. And that is what makes him special and what makes him good, because he chooses to limit himself. He chooses to hold back.
Chooses to not succumb to the worst things that he could
exactly
fall into and like uphold his own virtues, his own standards. Yeah.
Yes, he chooses to be better and to uphold virtues and standards and not become this all-powerful, omnipotent god that people would fear. So this book explores what might have happened had an angry, grieving Lois Lane been given the powers of Superman in his absence after his death. She manifests her grief and anger as vengeance, exacting her judgment and wrath upon the world and seeking what she deems true justice. She's basically her mantra is that Superman was too good for the world and that we wasted the gift of Superman and he must be avenged. The world must be brought to order and made worthy of his sacrifice.
Oh, wow.
And I really do like these short snapshots of alternate realities. I love getting to see the impact of iconic moments in comic history rewritten and the other possible paths explored. It's fun for me to check this out and to see this stuff, like, because I mean, like, I always actually do sit. I mean, this is why I like the Marvel What If comics as well, because I actually do sit there sometimes and I think, okay, so what if this went the other way, you know? And then getting someone actually write that and draw that for me and put it out in a comic form that I can buy is pretty cool. So Lois becomes the Eradicator. And I really do like the design of the Eradicator. It's this black suit with Superman's torn cape, and she's like perpetually in mourning. And there's a like dripping, running Kryptonian symbol of hope on her chest that's just like dripping down her chest. Like, I really do like the way this is written, and the art is really great. It takes you back in time to see the old character designs from the early 90s with Lex with long ginger locks and a beard. So, yeah, I mean, I introduced Ray to Ginger Lex Luthor before we started recording today. So...
Wait, before you go on, is this the Apex Lex you were talking about last week?
No, this isn't Apex Lex. This is Ginger Lex.
Oh God! All right.
This is Lex...
he doesn't look very Apex.
No, this is Lex in his prime. So basically, what happened is there were some continuity changes back in like the kind of in the like. We're talking like 80s, early 90s, like late 80s, early 90s, and. Lex Luthor had hair for some of these comics. He had a receding hairline. He had ginger hair. He wasn't shown as bald as normal as usual. And they changed his character slightly. And he was more of a. He went from being like the mad scientist angle to more of the like corporate villain angle kind of thing.
Right.
Businessman without a conscience and whatever else. And he ends up getting cancer, and he decides to fake his own death by crashing a jet in the Andes to cover the fact that he's had his brain taken out and put into a cloned body, and then passes himself off as his own 21-year-old illegitimate son and heir, Lex Luthor II. And this is where he gets like the full head of red hair from and everything. And like, oh yeah, he also puts on an Australian accent to pretend that he's like someone else. This is so absurd, isn't it?
Yeah, it's weird.
But yeah, anyway, so
it seems unnecessary, but
yeah, well, anyway, like that all goes wrong because he suffers from some disease that only clones have, and then he makes a deal with a demon, and the demon gives him full health and everything, and he comes back again with long red hair and a red beard. So that's where Ginger Lex came from. The convoluted history of Ginger Lex.
It seems like the least interesting part of this book. Because all the stuff you said about Lois sounds amazing.
Well, this has got nothing. This is like nothing. None of this is explained in this book. This is just stuff that I feel you need to know if you're going to open a book and be confronted with his ginger visage.
I see. Okay.
Because you'll be like, wait, Lex Luthor has a chin beard and hair? When did that happen? He's got like this whole lion thing going on, you know, like wears his hair like a mane. It like molds into his beard. So he's Lion Lex. He's not Apex Lex. He is an apex predator though, because that's what lions are.
I saw a comparison online saying he looks a little bit like Richard Branson in his prime.
Yes.
Kind of, but instead of blonde, it's ginger. Yeah, yes, I kind of see it.
Yeah, maybe
especially with the whole like, I don't know, was he a good capitalist back then, quote unquote?
I don't know, but I mean this. So yeah, it explores this path with Lois, and she just basically everything that we've just talked about with Superman being the best version of himself and not succumbing to his powers and not being a god. Lois ends up succumbing to those powers, and she ends up like manifesting her grief and her anger, and she there's this whole like montage section in the comic where it's like Superman went after bank robbers, I'll go after the banks, and she starts taking the world apart piece by piece to try and she because as a reporter, she would she would expose these people anyway in the papers. These people that have the corporate greed and whatever, people that have like done evil through like swindling people out of millions or whatever, and all this kind of stuff that we see in the papers today, where bankers are exposed for doing things or whatever. And there's never really any real justice comes of it. It just happens to come out into the open, and these guys go to jail for 5 years or whatever, and that's it. Well, this is what Lois's thing now was. I'm going to end this. I'm going to sort this out. So she's like, she's going after the bankers. She's going after the people, rather than just ending the war and destroying the weapons. She's going after the people that make the weapons, and it sort of like spirals and spirals and spirals, and the world begins to fear her. And then towards the end of the book, because like, with the comics, The Death and Return of Superman does actually return. But by the point Superman has returned, Lois has done so much damage, and the world fears her, and then Superman dies again. And then she is left as the Eradicator. And this world that fears her, like, and she is basically a god. She gets to pick and choose who lives and who dies in accordance with how they behave. She's like appointing herself judge, jury, and executioner of everyone in the world. So yeah, that's. I mean, I think I really enjoyed the story actually, in how it explores that.
Is this story just a part of this one issue, or is it gonna continue into any more?
No, this is a one-time thing.
Same as the previous Batman one, right?
Yeah, these are all like one shots. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Am I right in saying that the Marvel what ifs tend to be a bit more comedic, or like, because it sounds like this the DC stuff, or at least the last Batman one and this Superman one, this Lois Lane one, sound like really like dripping with pathos.
It is called the Dark Multiverse.
Right.
So basically, yeah, the point with these is it's not just it's like a look at things getting twisted and going wrong. So it's not just a
like a
what if, like it's it's just not like a Marvel what if. I mean, Marvel what ifs can get pretty dark as well in cases like what if things took a dark turn and stuff like that. You do get those kinds of but this is more what if. Rather than like a straight up what if story like you would get with Marvel, where it might not necessarily take a dark turn, like you say, it might just be like an alternate telling of something like a character makes a different choice and events play out differently. This is more of a what if, like the world, like it's when. So the easiest way to explain this is in the DC mythos, when you've got all the universes in the light, the universes that should be, and you've also got the Dark Multiverse, which is kind of like the mirror image of the normal multiverse. Now, these worlds in the Dark Multiverse should not be viable. They shouldn't survive. They should end. But it turns out they do survive, and this is like where things take a dark turn. So with the Dark Multiverse, it's where things go wrong.
Right.
And everything is about everything. It's about things going wrong. It's where the Batman Who Laughs comes from, because Batman makes the choice to kill the Joker, and that's where things go wrong.
Yeah, this sounds really interesting. Like, how many more are there going to be in part of this run, the Tales from the Dark Multiverse run?
I'm not actually sure. I'm just enjoying getting them and letting them appear in my pull box. So,
right.
I think the next one is called Blackest Night. So the next one is going to be to do with the Green Lantern event.
Green Lantern,
Night.
right?
Yeah. So that's going to be interesting.
Sounds cool.
Yeah, but I mean, I have to say I enjoyed this just as much as the Nightfall one, and I really cannot wait for more of these. They're really cool. The art is really good in this as well. It's really nice to see the old character designs. It's great. And like I said, I actually found myself listening to that song, the Death of Superman. The song's not called The Death of Superman. The song's called Superman's Song. But I might actually post a link to it in the show notes. It's a good song. It's a bit, it's like slow acoustic song. It's a bit dour, but it's good.
Speak my language, Greg.
Yeah. So, where should we go from there, Ray?
We can talk about Basketful of Heads, which is something I didn't spend a lot of time on, so I want to. Yeah, it's pretty great, but I don't have mega deep thoughts on it because I only just read it today. But I'm really keen to see what you have to say, because my entry point is that it's written by Joe Hill, and that was the reason I picked it up. So yeah, dive in. What
Basketful of Heads. So this is like the new Joe Hill book, Basketful of Heads, and this is it's like it's the first issue in a pop-up comic label that DC are doing. Like, it's within DC Black Label. You've got Hill House Comics, in which Joe Hill is overseeing this line of horror comics within DC Black Label. And they're all kind of like, from what I gather so far, they're all kind of like 6-issue, 7-issue runs. So that's kind of cool. And I got a kind of like a preview, but preview booklet for this, actually, a freebie preview thing, which I'll talk about in a bit, which has got like little bits of previews of each like a couple of the books in the line on there. So this is Basketful of Heads, written by Joe Hill, art by Leomax, colours by Dave Stewart, and lettered by Darren Bennett. I should actually give you the it also includes Sea Dogs, which was written by Joe Hill, art by Dan McDade, and colours by John Callis, and letters by Wes Abbott. So it has like a bonus story in the back, which is going to run throughout the rest of the line. So you kind of have to like pick up the rest of the comics to get the Sea Dogs tale as well. So this was cool, and it had this kind of like video nasty horror vibe that I dig. So as an opener, it's fantastic. It's part of Joe Hill's pop-up label at DC Comics, and I gotta tell you, it's a strong start. I actually picked up a freebie sampler at my LCS, which has a preview for this book and a couple of the others in the line. I'm excited for these stories. I am a fan of Joe Hill's work, and Lock and Key was my in with his stuff. So, and what this book does well, that all video nasty revenge tales do well, is it exploits your empathy. It shows you good people doing good things, and it shows you bad things happening to those good people, or it will show you bad things happening to those good people in the next one. If there's one thing that still sets me on edge in horror stories, actually, it's the house invasion angle. Like the opening of Lock and Key, with the house invasion and what happens to Nina Locke. I think for me, the house invasion angle is the most sickening and disturbing thing, because like the idea of people invading a place of safety and comfort for you and doing unspeakable things and violating the sanctity and perverting the very idea in your head that you hold that the four walls around you are the safest space imaginable. Like, you've made that your safe space, and someone's going to come in there and do the things that you have just do nightmarish things, and it's just horrible. And I love the setup here and the premise, and I really wish the first issue went further than it did, because it's a painful cliffhanger.
100% with you there. Yeah.
The art, it has this great simplicity and warmth while also carrying a definite air of realism. It's just enough realism to make it pop, with the lines being simple and sparse. The colour work is what brings the magic, with the haziness over it. So it's like this haziness, because it is the end of summer, so it's like this haziness with retro echoes in the warm tones that make it feel kind of like of the time that the story is set.
Mm-hmm.
And this slow build that hooks you in, it's the slow build that hooks you in, and that's what I love. Also, the bonus story Sea Dogs, this is also super cool. It's 2 tales for the price of 1, and a definite nod to the horror stories of old. The art in Sea Dogs is wonderfully detailed and gleefully visceral, bloodthirsty. So it's like the savageness bleeding out of every open wound of a page. It has this like innate savageness about it. Even everyone's got like this kind of like smile with bared teeth and things like that, and it just looks savage and you know, like raw. And every page is an open wound, and like every panel's an open wound. And even in the twisted smile of the intelligence officer, like it's just there. Like war is savage, werewolves are savage beasts, and this comic by its very nature is also a savage beast.
Yeah, it's like the violence that we are withheld from in Basketful of Heads, like the thing that's promised and will likely happen in the next issue, we're given that catharsis immediately in Sea Dogs, I think.
Yes, yeah.
Which is it's a horrible trick to play, really, because
it is,
I want it from the first one, but I'm also like I'm curious about what Sea Dogs is doing too, and it's almost like a gut punch because it starts with violence in this like horrible, disgusting way. Yeah,
exactly. And this is it's a werewolf story set during the American War of Independence, which I really like. And you've got this kind of like sort of Black Ops team of werewolves sent to carry out messy assassinations to cause horror and spread fear among the British soldiers. It's like shock tactics. And my one criticism is that I have to buy all the other comics in the line to get the full Sea Dog story, which is fucking clever.
Yeah, it's super clever. Yeah.
And I was probably going to buy them anyway, but that's not the point, because they all seem to be short runs. Like Basketful of Heads will only be 7 issues long. And it'll make for a mighty good trade once it's collected, I think. What I'll do, actually, because I didn't really tell you what the book was actually about. I just described it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read you the blurb for Basketful of Heads. The rain lashes the grassy dunes of Brody Island, and seagulls scream above the bay. A slender figure in a raincoat carries a large wicker basket, which looks like it might be full of melons, covered by a blood-stained scrap of the American flag. This is the story of June Branch, a young woman trapped with 4 cunning criminals who have snatched her boyfriend for deranged reasons of their own. Now she must fight for her life, with the help of an impossible 8th century Viking axe that can pass through a man's neck in a single swipe and leave the severed head still conscious and capable of supernatural speech. Each disembodied head has a malevolent story of its own to tell, and it isn't long before June finds herself in a desperate struggle to hack through their lies and manipulations, racing to save the man she loves before time runs out. Plus, in this book is a premiere chapter of the backup story Sea Dogs, which sails across all the Hill House Comics titles. And it's really annoying that I can't get the second part of Sea Dogs in the second issue of Basketful of Heads, that I have to buy the next comic. But I mean, I'm not... I think I'm only mad about the fact that it's forcing me to spend money.
You're going to buy these anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I don't have a great deal more to add to Basketful of Heads on top of what you've already said. The one thing I will say, or a few things I will say, okay, so it's very reminiscent of some of my favorite like 70s slasher films. It reminds me a lot of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, like the thing you said about its mood and tone and like the suffused colors of the summer and the era that it's from, which is like early 80s. I think that's very reminiscent of those kind of movies. I think the opening is amazing. I forget which comic we talked about recently, which had a really strong like cold open, but that's exactly what this book is doing. It has a fantastic cold open that sets up the premise and sets up the tone of like the supernatural aspects of this world, and has this great thing where it has somebody asking the question, what you got there in that basket? And then the next page is a splash page of Basketful of Heads. Like it's a really great like draw-in tactic, and I really like that. I love the premise, like you said, of the supernatural aspects of the axe that she finds in her possession, and that irritating but also like really tantalizing tease about how this comic ends and the promise of at least the next one. I'm really drawn in, and yeah, I think this is really interesting stuff, and I'm always here for whatever Joe Hill does.
Exactly. And that splash page you're talking about with Basketful of Heads on it, on the white page, I want that on a t-shirt because it looks like a t-shirt.
Yeah, that'd be a great t-shirt.
It does look like a really good t-shirt design, and it also it's got like this kind of like tattoo flash thing going on. So, I mean, I like it. I would get that on a t-shirt. Massively get that on a t-shirt. But yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to the other books in this line. Like this sampler I picked up. It's got previews of another couple of comics in the line. So it's got a preview of the Dollhouse and
the Dollhouse family. Right?
Yeah, the Dollhouse family. That's it. Yeah, and the Lolo Woods. And the Dollhouse family, actually, I'm excited about this one. This one sounds pretty cool. This one's very, very, very lock and key, actually, from the premise, from what I'm getting from the couple of pages that I get treated to in here. And it has this very nice art style as well. This very kind of like it's realism, and it's like watercolored. Like you're looking at an old, you know, like when you look at an old children's book with the illustrations. Yeah, which I think really works very well for this type of story.
Yeah, and we talked about the Lolo Woods last time. You said it reminded you of an album cover that you liked.
Yes. Yes.
But yeah, that one looks really interesting, where it's like this pair of kids on the like a mossy, overgrown skull of, I guess, a tiger or some sort of other predatory animal. Yeah, it's really cool. Yeah,
the art style in this is quite. It's got quite bold lines and quite loose in the preview of the Lolo Woods that I'm getting here, and it's pretty cool. And the premise for that sounds pretty nice too. I mean, all of these sound really good. So, you know what we'll be talking about on Ace Comicals for the next few months.
Horror comic, yeah.
At least one. And I guess onwards from there, I should tell you about the other thing I read for Halloween.
What was that?
That was Count Crowley, Reluctant Monster Hunter.
Yeah, what the hell is this, Greg?
Okay, so this is Count Crowley, Reluctant Monster Hunter, and this is written by David Dasmalkian, art by Lucas Kettner, colours by Lauren F., and letters by Frank Svetovic. So I'll give you the straight away. I'll just go in with the blurb. I mean, we talked about this on the pull list, and I love the cover for this. Straight away, the cover's fantastic because it's like a nod to old horror comics in the way that it's like this. The art style of the cover, like painted with like the I don't know, it just has that horror poster, horror movie vibe going on. You know, like those old painted horror posters.
It reminds me of one of those old painted movie horror posters.
Yeah, like, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. That kind of pulpy vibe.
Yeah, and I love it.
Yeah.
So, aspiring reporter Jerry Bartman is furious when she's demoted to hosting the nightly creature feature at her small-town TV station. But Jerry quickly learns that there is more to horror hosting than just introducing bad B-movies. Her first night in the costume of her missing predecessor, Count Crowley, finds her face-to-face with a living, breathing werewolf? Or was she just that drunk? So, this book has the cold open of her face-to-face with this werewolf outside the studio. They love their cold opens right now, don't they? These comic book creators. It's like, but anyway, it's really good. Like, it has this really good cold open, straight in, media res. then we are treated to what is the rest of the story. And it's as funny as it is sad. I guess for me, it's quite a sad story at first, and you really do feel for Jerry, but it's also funny. It's framed in a comedic way. I love the book and I love the premise. It's I wonder what happened to have to. I actually wonder what happened to Jerry to push her to alcoholism, because in this, the main character is an alcoholic. And it does get alluded to, like something happened to her somewhere before she came back to this town to work. But we don't know exactly what. And it is basically just an awesome punk rock horror show that had me glued from start to finish. Maybe we'll find out in the later issues, actually, what it is that pushed her to alcoholism. But it's a great opening book that explains step by step how this woman finds herself in this absurd situation. Like, in this Count Crowley costume, face to face with a werewolf. The art in this book is fantastic, and the writing is fun and also very emotive. I love Jerry as a character. She's like this zero fucks journalist who appears to be bored with small town reporting, and she kind of sets her own gig on fire by like just having like a self-destruct moment on like live while she's reporting on a Renaissance fair. The cover art is gorgeous on the first issue, and the interiors are also fantastic, and there's some like really great interesting page layouts that show a car crash of a broadcast from two perspectives as it happens live and through the monitors. And I get a headache just looking at some of these pages because there's so much alcohol. And the way in which it is consumed and written into the story, it does feel like bad, like poison. Like it just looks queasy. Mm-hmm. It evokes that point that, you know, the point when you're drunk and you know you're drunk and you feel like shit, but you carry on anyway.
All too well.
Yeah, well, that's what it like evokes that in you when you're reading it, and it makes you feel that. And, wow, okay. Like, you know how in some stories that show alcoholism, the alcohol still kind of appears desirable in some way? Mm. Like, it's still presented in a semi-polished way, like whiskey in a nice decanter, or good brands, etc.
Right.
But this gets it right by making it look disgusting. And in the way that Jerry guzzles down bottle after bottle of bourbon, it's all, like, coming down her lips and stuff out of her face. And she drinks cheap wine straight from the box at one point, and... It just makes it look like horrible. And the character design of Count Crowley is awesome. And like, can we just talk about how much I would love the job of horror host? Like,
yeah, go dive in.
That would be one of my dream gigs, like introducing horror movies on TV. Mm. I could do that. I could do that all day long.
I could see you doing that for sure.
I would love that. I would love that so much. But yeah, I mean, she lands my dream gig and she doesn't like it, but hey, I'll do it. But no, yeah, it's a really good tale. And yeah, I really enjoyed this book. It was a good thing to read at Halloween, and it has like all the reverence for classic horror comics. And at the same time, it's this great story that, I don't know, like, I could set this to a soundtrack of Blitzkid and Misfits songs quite easily. It's, yeah, I dig this book, and I can actually see this, I could actually see this making, like, a good Netflix show or something. Because it kind of has that feel about it, that it would work well in that kind of environment.
Okay.
Yeah. But it's great, and I recommend it to anyone. So yeah, that is Count Crowley, the Reluctant Monster Hunter. And that wraps us up for Ace Comicals this week. So I guess we better move on to the pull list, hadn't we?
Yeah, go for it.
So yeah, I mean, like, this is the first lot of comics here on November the 6th, and these are all things that will be available when this podcast is available. And kick you off with X-Force number 1, which is the next in the line of things to come spinning out hocks and pocks. So, the cost of the future isn't cheap. X-Force is the CIA of the mutant world. One half intelligence branch, one half special ops. Beast, Jean Grey, and Sage on one side, Wolverine, Kid Omega, and Domino on the other. In a perfect world, there would be no need for an X-Force, but we're not there yet. So that sounds kind of cool. Like, I guess, like, this is, like, the next kind of, like, chunk of the puzzle in these different teams and in how Krakoa is being run. Because Krakoa is a mutant nation, and these people, you know, like, all mutants are welcome there, and they all, like the sort of the main mutants that we know from the other X-Men comics seem to be fulfilling these roles within government or in the society of Krakoa. And we have this whole, like, rich thing explained to us. And yeah, I'm down for this.
This sounds interesting. I do like the X-Force stuff, but this is the thing that I worry about with, like, they streamline all these things, and you have House of X, Powers of X, and that would be enough for me. And then this is where I worry that they're diluting it too much. However, it's one of those things I will probably eventually read, but secondary to Hox and Pox, I think.
Yeah, I mean, this all comes spinning out of, and, like, it's basically House of X and Powers of X set it all up. So that's the beginning. It ushers you into this new world, teaches you about Krakoa and everything else, and about why things are the way they are and why things have to happen that way, and etc. And then this is basically the day-to-day running of Krakoa split across several books. If you get
it's that thing though where, like, what Hickman has done is, like, converged all these different threads into one neat narrative, and then they're slowly diverging again, and I kind of wish they wouldn't diverge, but I understand why they do, because there's so many stories to tell. But for my mental sake, please just keep it simple. But I see the appeal of this.
It's pretty simple right now, Ray. You should get
I need to get on it before it gets too complicated again, I know.
The next one on my list is Undiscovered Country. Now, this is a new Image book. And in this special oversized first issue, readers will journey into the near future and an unknown nation that was once the United States of America. A land that's become shrouded in mystery after walling itself off from the rest of the world without explanation over 30 years ago. When a team seeking a cure for a global pandemic breaches US borders, they quickly find themselves in a struggle to survive in this strange and deadly lost continent. And this is written by Scott Snyder and Charles Soule. Premise sounds pretty cool. I've seen a lot of buzz about this actually on Twitter. Because it's got quite a pedigree in some of the people involved in it, and I'd be interested to see where this goes. So it's something that I will, tentatively check out because it sounds new and interesting.
Yeah, I actually caught some of the variant covers for this. That's what caught my eye, but there's one by Tom Whalen, which looks fantastic. I'll send a link to that in the show notes, but just this flat, cartoony style of these interesting, strange, mythical creatures that are being ridden. Looks kind of like a flat, modern Mad Max aesthetic. It looks very interesting. Yeah. So, some of it looks very cool.
Yeah. I'll be interested to see how this is. I mean, it's like this post-apocalypse stuff. But yeah, I'm into this. After that, I've got Legion of Superheroes #1, which was something that I picked up from the DC offerings. Now, it's like a jumping on point for the 31st century, if you like. So, welcome to the 31st century. Inspired by the acts of and lessons learned from the greatest heroes of all time, the Legion of Superheroes have gathered together to stop a galaxy from repeating its past mistakes. The greatest lineup of heroes in comic book history return with new, fresh, and reader-friendly stories. And this is Brian Michael Bendis doing the Legion of Superheroes. So this is like the DC this is the future of the DC far future, basically the far future of the DC world. And it's just interesting because it's a hopping on point to hear some tales about some classic characters. We've got Lock and Key Dog Days, which was something I'm quite excited about. Now, this is like another book, like another one-shot, I think, I hope it's a one-shot, within the Lock and Key world. So, two new stories by creators Joe Hill and Gabriel Rodriguez, Nailed It and Dog Days, plus a behind-the-scenes tease of the coming TV series and a 5-page preview of an all-new series by Hill and artist Martin Simmons too.
Yeah, I'm 100% in for this. Anything Lock and Key.
Yeah, and the cover looks great. Have you seen it?
Yeah, with the dog like diving after a key.
Yeah. So like more key stuff, more key house, more weird happenings. I'm 100% in for this.
But it also looks quite playful and colourful, which is interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So Nailed It and Dog Days are your two tales. I'm hoping that one of them is a silent story about a dog, and I'm hoping that it's silent panels and it's a dog's adventure with a key.
That sounds amazing. I would be so into that.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping for. That's my what I want from this. Whether we get it or not, it's a whole other thing. But I just, is that a corgi on the front? I think it is, isn't it?
Oh, I wouldn't know. But the dog looks cute but terrifying in the same moment.
Yeah, because it's all warped and cartoony and it's underwater, but it's got like this kind of like corgi-ish look about it. So like, maybe we're going to get a cute Lock and Key story. I mean, is that possible?
Yeah, there was some cuteness in the original Lock and Key run.
Yeah, but it was like cuteness tainted with black mold. It had,
we'll see where it goes, right?
Had some dirt around it, It wasn't straight up cuteness, but yeah. So Everything number 3 is also out this week. We also have a book called The Crone, which is a Dark Horse comic, and this is kind of interesting. So the sword saviour and champion of men, once known as Bloody Bliss, is now nothing more than a reclusive old crone. Does she have the strength to answer the call for one last adventure? Only Dennis Culver and Justin Greenwood know for sure in this story that is equal parts Unforgiven and Xena the Warrior Princess. So it's like this old lady who's like a bit Andy. Bit Andy with a sword. Comes out of retirement to hack and slash some unknown threat, I believe. But yeah, I mean, like this just looks interesting to me just because of the premise alone and the cover. So I like me some fantasy stories as well. So that's something that piques my interest. Also, there's one called Heist. Heist is a Vault comic. And this looks cool because it's kind of like this sci-fi thing, and it's this old school sci-fi thing, and I'm all over stuff like this. So this is Heist number 1. Welcome to Planet Heist. It's the cutthroat capital of the entire Niring system, home to billions of the worst men and women in the galaxy. The Pan-Galactic government has no idea what to do with the planet, but conman Glaine Breld and his band of thieves know exactly what to do with Heist. They're going to steal it. It's an Ocean's 11 in space, brought to you by writer Paul Tobin, Calder and Bandit, and Aruna Sushini of The Replacer, the only minds crazy enough to steal an entire world. So, these guys going to, like, steal a planet. If you're down with that.
Cool. Yeah, sounds good.
I'm down with that. I mean, have you seen the cover?
I haven't, no.
It's beautiful. In fact, what I will do is I will show you.
Oh, no, I just found it. It's interesting. It's not my kind of style. It harkens to an age that I'm not a huge fan of. But yeah, I'm interested in the premise.
You don't like that Flash Gordon original, what's it stuff, Buck Rogers-y type?
Yeah, not really. That's not my idea of like interesting, cool. But the premise sounds really cool, and the background of that cover image where it's like a clockwork planet with a chunky mechanical dial on it looks really funky.
Yeah, I think that's like a safe thing, isn't it? Like
Yeah, it's meant to be a safe. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I do rather enjoy the campiness of like this, like this Flash Gordon style sci-fi, this like Buck Rogersy type stuff, and like I find it quite endearing in some ways. I quite like that type of sci-fi. I like the kind of air it has. I don't know. It's just me. It's fun, is what it is. And people get to wear these outlandish space costumes. And yeah, that wraps us up for November 6th. So moving on to November the 13th, we've got the Batman's Grave number 2.
Hang on. Oh. Wait, I've got one.
You've
for
got
November
one.
6th.
You've got one. Go,
yeah, I do.
Go.
So apart from Lock and Key Dog Days and Everything number 3 that you mentioned, I also noticed that there is a Genlock comic coming out. That's by DC Comics. So Genlock is was a cartoon on Rooster Teeth that came out, I think it was either earlier this year or late last year, but it's the one that has some really good voice talent in it. It's got Michael B. Jordan, Dakota Fanning, Maisie Williams, Koichi Yamadera, who else? David Tennant. It's a really interesting like Voltron / like general funky mech anime style to it. So if I can get some more of that before the next season comes out, then that sounds great. So that'll be out on November 6th as well.
Yeah. Yes. I've not watched anything on Rooster Teeth yet, you know.
It's the only thing I've ever watched on Rooster Teeth. I don't think there's much else on it that really appeals to me. I think Genlock was sold to me on the strength of the people involved, and it turned out to be a really interesting story.
It's really bad, but my TV diet consists primarily of Netflix these days. Like, I don't have a Now TV account anymore or anything like that, and I don't watch a lot of TV anyways. I mean, like, I guess I'm watching TV again now because Riverdale and BoJack's are back. But
yeah, BoJack is my latest thing, and The Good Place, and The Watchmen, the TV series, which I would like to talk about at some point, but I will do that when Leon's back.
Yes, I need to watch that as well. This is my gripe with not having a Now TV account, but not particularly wanting a Now TV account either, because there's only something I want to watch once in a blue moon.
Yeah, I feel you with that.
Yeah. So yeah, November 13th, we've got the Batman's Grave number 2, which we talked about the first one on the previous episode to this, where we have Marv on as a guest. Go listen. There's a lot of bat love on that episode. We got Tales from the Dark Multiverse, Blackest Night, which is, well, I'll tell you. What could be blacker than the Blackest Night? I don't know, DC, you tell me. From the pages of Dark Knight's Metal comes a Dark Multiverse retelling of the Green Lantern event that changed the DC universe forever. Only this time, the Black Lanterns win. Now, 23 days after the apocalypse witnessed the rise of Sinestro as the Limbo Lantern. Trapped between life and death as a white and black lantern, Sinestro seeks to save the universe, or end his miserable life once and for all. Joined by Dove, Lobo, and Mr. Miracle, the last living beings in the universe will put everything on the line to give their world one final chance. So that sounds rather interesting. The fact that you can be both a Black Lantern and a White Lantern at the same time.
I have no idea what the Green Lantern stuff is, but I've always wanted to get into it, so this does sound funky. Like with all of the other ones you've talked about in this run, it sounds really interesting. So, I mean, like,
you basically, like, obviously different lantern colours, different emotions, different affinities to different things, like red is anger, etc.
Obviously,
Black is death, white is life. So
okay, you don't have to explain it right now, but I will. Yeah. I'm interested in picking this up.
Yeah, you should. It's great. Looks great. Sounds great. I'm in for it. So yeah, the Limbo Lantern. Also, Moonshine's back. Moonshine number 13. We talked a lot. Well, I talked about Moonshine on my One-Some in a previous episode. We've got Punisher Soviet number 1, which I quite like the idea of. This is Garth Ennis writing Punisher again. You love me some Punisher. So Garth Ennis, co-creator of The Boys and The Preacher, is back at Marvel and writing The Punisher again, this time with art phenom Jason Burrows of Moon Knight, 303 and Crossed at his side. A dozen Russian mobsters lie dead at the Punisher's feet, and he wasn't the one who pulled the trigger. If you know Frank Castle, you know this doesn't necessarily set his mind at ease. Who is in New York City decimating the Russian mob? And can it be long before they come into conflict with Frank? So, yeah, I'm on for that. Some Max Comics, Punisher Soviet. Down with that. I'm thinking, because it's called Punisher Soviet, that it is actually set during the time of the Soviet Union. We also have Family Tree #1. Now, Family Tree, this is I think this is an Image book, isn't it?
It is indeed, yeah.
Yeah. So the cover for this looks interesting, because you've got this person lying down and their hair all kind of splayed out, but then their hair becomes roots, and then the roots turn red. So in the family tree, an 8-year-old girl literally begins to transform into a tree. Her single mum, troubled brother, and possibly insane grandfather embark on a bizarre and heart-wrenching odyssey across the back roads of America in a desperate search for a cure to her horrifying transformation before it's too late. And this is Jeff Lemire. So what do you think about that, Ray?
Yeah, this would have been my one pick for that week. Just sounds like a really interesting premise, I think.
Girl becomes tree.
Mm-hmm.
I'm down with that. That's why it's on my list. It just sounds quite... I mean, it's like... it's got that horror fantasy edge to it, which I kind of like. The next one of the Hill House line is out that week as well, actually, on November 13th, which is the Dollhouse Family, #1, which I had the preview for, and it is looking great. So the premise for this... on Alice's 6th birthday, her dying great-aunt sent her the birthday gift she didn't know she always wanted. A big, beautiful 19th century dollhouse, complete with a family of antique dolls. In no time at all, the dollhouse isn't just Alice's favourite toy, it's her whole world. And soon, young Alice learns she can enter the house to visit a new group of friends, straight out of a heartwarming children's novel, The Dollhouse Family. But while the Dollhouse Family welcome her with open arms, the real world, her family life, is becoming much more complicated, and deep within the dollhouse's twisting halls, the Black Room awaits, with an offer to Alice. The house can fix all this, the Black Room says. All she has to do is say the words. So this is Mike Carey and Peter Gross of Lucifer and the Unwritten. They're joined by Vince Locke of the Sandman books to bring the most horrifying vision yet to Hill House Comics. A story that echoes into centuries past, into Alice's tormented future, and into the beating heart of madness that makes up our world, literally. Plus in Chapter 2, plus you get Chapter 2 of Sea Dogs. And bloodthirsty colonial lycanthropes prepare to gut the Royal Navy from within. So, yay, Sea Dogs. But yeah, I mean, this is the one that had like a lot of Lock and Key vibe when I read the preview for it. So, I don't know how do you feel about that, Ray?
Yeah, that one sounds good. Like you said, because it has the most Lock and Key vibe, but obviously with a dollhouse that you get to dive into, which is an aspect of the original Lock and Key. Yeah, sounds cool. I like the artwork in it as well.
Mm-hmm. You've also got Morbius #1, which is that's Morbius the Vampire. Morbius you may know from various run-ins he's had with Spider-Man. Morbius was in the Spider-Man cartoon as well from way back. If you ever watched any of the Spider-Man cartoon, Ray.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember Morbius.
Yep, so Morbius is the living vampire. Or is he more? For years, Nobel Prize-winning biologist Michael Morbius has been struggling to cure himself of his vampirism. And now, for the first time in years, one may be within reach. But the path to it is littered with dangers and worse. So this is like an all-new ongoing series of Morbius. So he has his own book, and I'm down for that.
Giving it a quick Google, it looks like there's a Jared Leto Morbius movie in the works. Is that right? Ugh.
What?
Yeah, this could be nonsense. I've just given it a very quick Google just to like try and find an image of Morbius, and there was the first thing that popped up was Marvel's Morbius 2020 announced in April of this year. I don't want that. I don't want Jared Leto as Morbius. I play a good Morbius, maybe, but yeah.
I don't want Jared Leto in anything anymore.
Well, yes, that's what I was avoiding saying, but yeah.
Well, actually, no, that's unfair, because I bet in the right role, he could be good.
Yeah, maybe. Apparently, this is a real thing. It says 2020, but
I think we're all just still pretty raw from his Joker. So
you're telling me, yeah.
Anyway, on to the last book that I have on my list for November 13th. This is another one on Vault Comics. This is Black Stars Above #1. And this looks really interesting because it has like the cover has this kind of like sepia etching thing going on, like an old, I know, like etching on an old, like an old book. You see these old books,
like a woodcut kind of print, wood print.
Yeah, that kind of thing. The year is 1887, and a storm brews. A young fur trapper flees her overbearing family, only to get lost in a dreamlike winter wilderness that harbours a cosmic threat. The fur trade is dead and the nation is changing, yet Eulalie Dubois has spent her entire life tending to her family's trapline, isolated from the world. A chance at freedom comes in the form of a parcel that needs delivering to a nameless town north of the wilderness. Little does Eulalie know something sinister hides in those woods, and it yearns for what she has. Mm-hmm. So, speaks my language. Cosmic threat. Woods, strange parcels.
Cosmic threat, woods. I love that. I also like this cover is really cool. I do like the design of it, and I know that the it shows a woman stood in front of a forest, and there's like this eerie supernatural space event happening above her. But to me, because I saw the thumbnail first, it just looks a bit like a hairy belly button. I don't know. Do you know what I mean? Like, it kind of puts me off a little.
Yeah, but
I can look past that. I can look past it. I'll give it a go.
I'm seeing something beautifully Lovecraftian.
Mm-hmm.
And
of course you are.
I'm hoping it's something beautifully Lovecraftian.
I'm seeing a belly button, so...
Belly buttons can be Lovecraftian.
Sure.
Cyclopean belly buttons. No, but yeah, no, I'm down for this book, 100%. I'm down for every book on my list. I just feel like I have to tell you that I am at the end of the blurb for each one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's why it's on your pull list, Greg.
Yeah, I know. That's my pull list. So that's the pull list for this week's Ace Comicals. So that has been Ace Comicals number 75. Belated Happy Halloween. You can find us at www.acecomicals.com, which is kind of the hub for everything we do, where you will find us on Twitter under Ace Comicals, Facebook under Ace Comicals, Instagram under Ace Comicals. You can find us to listen to us in all good podcast places, all good podcasty places like Apple Podcasts, Castbox, Castro, Overcast, Pocket Casts, Spotify, which is my personal favourite, Stitcher, and TuneIn. You can find me on Twitter under @Batto, that's BATTOU, and you can get in touch with us on Twitter. You can DM me, you can DM the Ace Comicals account, you can email us at acecomicals@gmail.com. Ray, where can we find you?
On Twitter @Monkeh, so that's @MOONKEH.
So that has been Ace Comicals number 75. That's Ace Comicals, over and out.